Did Hitler die, or did he escape? Suspenseful music. What we're going to talk about today is something serious. It might turn everything you've learned about history upside down. Did Hitler really take his own life in April 1945? The official story says he shot himself in the Reichstag bunker, and his wife, Eva Braun, took poison. Then they burned their bodies. Is this the whole truth? Or is there something else, something bigger that was hidden? The official story has a lot of holes in it. Questions come up that don't have good answers. And did his body really burn in the Reichstag bunker like the official story says? Where's the solid proof? Where are the remains that leave no doubt? Or was the truth hidden? And the Nazi leader, the mastermind of the biggest war humanity has ever seen, managed to escape. Could he have fooled the whole world and slipped through their fingers like a ghost? Today, we're going to dive into the deepest theories and uncover strange evidence and shocking testimonies. Testimonies from people who saw things they weren't supposed to see, and documents that stayed secret for many, many years. We're going to try to find the thread of truth and maybe change how you see history completely. Get ready, because what you're going to hear today might shock you. Are you ready to question everything? Let's begin. Okay, so let's start with the story everyone knows, or at least the story they know. Picture this. Germany, April 30th, 1945. Berlin is surrounded. The Soviet soldiers are right at the door. And Hitler, the guy who once made the whole world tremble, is stuck in a bunker deep underground, all alone, and totally beaten. The official story says that in his very last moments, he decided to end it all. He shot himself, and his wife, Eva Braun, took a cyanide pill. Hitler's orders were super clear. Burn my body and Eva's body right away. He said, I don't want the Soviets to get my body. I don't want what happened to Mussolini in Italy to happen to me. So, his helpers dragged both bodies out of the bunker. They put them in a hole made by a bomb, poured gasoline on them, and lit them on fire. The fire burned the bodies. Or that's what they say happened. But this is where the big questions start popping up. Questions that don't really have good answers. Where's the real proof? Where are the bodies that we can say for sure 100% are Hitler and Eva? The Soviet Union, the ones who took over Berlin and went into the bunker, kept changing their story. 1 minute they'd say, we found some remains. The next they'd say, nope, didn't find anything for sure. So if the official story has some holes in it, what's the other idea? The other idea is the escape theory. And this theory isn't just silly talk or make-believe. There's proof, stories from people and papers that really back it up. First off, stories from people who saw things. Years after the war, and even for many, many years, people from all over the world said they saw Hitler. Now, of course, a lot of these stories could just be people imagining things, or folks wanting to get famous. But when the same kinds of stories pop up from certain places, and they sound kind of similar, you start to take it more seriously. The places where people most often said they saw Hitler were in South America, especially Argentina and Brazil. Why those countries, you ask? Well, because they were a safe place for lots of Nazis who ran away after the war. They had people there to help them, and governments that were either friendly or at least looked the other way. Some stories said people saw him in fancy hotels, others said on quiet farms way out in the country. There are even some really wild ideas that he made it all the way to the South Pole, to a secret Nazi base there called New Berlin. But even more important than stories from regular folks are the secret reports from spy agencies. Back in 1945, right after they said he died, the American FBI and later even the CIA got lots of secret reports. These reports said Hitler wasn't dead and that he had actually escaped. One of the most famous of these reports talks about a German submarine, or maybe even a few of them. They supposedly left Europe and headed for South America right before the war ended. And guess who might have been on board? Important Nazi people, and maybe even Hitler himself. These reports were taken so seriously that people looked into them for years and years. And in some papers that used to be top secret but aren't anymore, we find some pretty amazing details. For example, there are files with stories from people who said they saw someone who looked a whole lot like Hitler. This was in a small town in Argentina called Tungares, way back in 1954. Now, this is where the story takes an even stranger turn, and it's something people really debate. In 2009, more than 60 years after the war ended, some news came out that really shook up scientists and historians. The University of Connecticut, working with a documentary show, got special permission to check out a piece of a skull kept in the Russian Federal Archives in Moscow. This piece, which had a bullet hole in it, was what the Russians said was the definite proof that Hitler killed himself. They used to show it as one of the most important things left from World War II. American scientists took DNA samples from this piece. They wanted to make sure once and for all, using new technology, that it was really Hitler's skull. The result was a shock, a really big shock. The DNA test proved that this skull piece did not belong to Hitler. Even worse, it belonged to a woman between 20 and 40 years old. Can you believe it? The main proof the Soviets showed the world for Hitler's death turned out to be a lie, or at least a really big mistake. This discovery brought up a whole lot of questions. If this skull isn't Hitler's, then whose is it? Was it Eva Braun's? Even if it was Eva's, that means there's no real proof that Hitler died from these remains. And if it belonged to some unknown woman, how did it get here? Were the remains mixed up, or was the evidence faked from the start? Okay, now we're getting into a tricky spot where real history and some wild ideas mix. So, after World War II, American spies had a secret mission. It was called Operation Paperclip. Their job was to find hundreds of Nazi scientists and engineers, the ones making super advanced weapons, and bring them to America. This was all part of the Cold War, that big standoff with the Soviet Union. America wanted to use what these smart people knew before the Soviets could get to them. And guess what? The plan worked really well. Hundreds of scientists, like a famous guy named Wernher von Braun, were brought to America. Their old Nazi records were erased, and they got new names and new lives. This really happened. It's a known fact. Now, some really wild ideas say, what if Hitler himself was part of this deal, or a deal just like it, but it was kept super secret? Could they have snuck him out with a fake name and fake papers in return for some big secrets he knew? Now, this might sound totally nuts, but let's just think about it for a minute. Why would America, or any of the countries fighting against Hitler, even think about doing something like that? Well, maybe to get secrets about Nazi spies, or find hidden treasures like paintings and gold, or even learn about those powerful new weapons they were making. Or maybe, and this is a really scary thought, some of the Allied spies actually liked some Nazi ideas, or at least thought it would be good to keep some important Nazis around for future use. Now, this is all just guessing, okay? But when you see how big Operation Paperclip was, you gotta ask yourself, if they could sneak out hundreds of scientists, why couldn't they sneak out just one more guy, especially if that guy was like the ultimate grand prize? And let's not forget, a lot of the big Nazi bosses, the ones who did awful, terrible things in the war, disappeared for a long time after the war ended. Adolf Eichmann, one of the main guys behind the Holocaust, lived in Argentina with a fake name for years before Israeli spies finally caught him. And Josef Mengele, they called him the Angel of Death at the Auschwitz camp. He died in Brazil in 1979, still hiding out. Let's just say for a moment that Hitler really did escape. Let's imagine he made it to South America or somewhere else, and lived there with a fake name. The biggest question is, why would this be kept a secret? Why hasn't the truth been told to the world after all this time? If there's real proof he escaped, why is it still a secret? This is where we get into conspiracy theories. But some of these ideas might actually make sense. The first idea, and the most common one, is that it was to stop things from getting chaotic and falling apart. Just imagine if, back in 1950 or 1960, an official paper came out saying, "Hitler isn't dead, Hitler is living in Argentina." What would have happened? It would have been like a worldwide earthquake. The people who gave their lives, the soldiers who fought, and the countries that teamed up to beat the Nazis, all of that would have seemed like a joke. Trust in governments, in the official stories, would have completely crumbled. It could have led to huge problems for countries and people. So, was a decision made by the very top leaders to keep the truth hidden for the good of everyone? The second idea, and this one is a bit darker, is about secret political deals. Could it be that some big countries or their spy agencies knew where Hitler was, or even helped him escape, in exchange for something valuable? Like secrets about Germany's advanced war technology, like big rockets, jet planes, or even atom bomb research. Nazi Germany was way ahead in some science areas. Was a deal made like, "We'll keep quiet about you escaping, or even help you get away if you give us these secrets"? Today, after all these years, and after everything we've heard and talked about, from the official story full of holes, to the worrying clues about his escape, the shocking skull story, and the mysterious spy operations, the truth, folks, is still lost. There's no solid proof, 100%, that Hitler died in that bunker in Berlin in 1945. No confirmed body, no final confession, no real closing of this tricky case. But also, there's no solid proof, 100%, that he escaped and lived a second life somewhere. All we have are theories, a few scattered stories, papers that can mean different things, and guesses. The truth is lost between secret papers we might never see, unknown stories from people who maybe died and took their secrets with them, and so many questions that still don't have answers. Will we ever know the whole truth? Maybe, and maybe not. So you, our awesome viewer, what do you think after everything you've heard? Do you think Hitler really killed himself like the official story says, and all these theories are just made-up stories and dreams? Or do you lean towards thinking he managed to escape, fooled the whole world, and lived his life away from justice, leaving behind a mystery that puzzles historians and researchers for generations? It's your call. Think about it. Look into it more, and make up your own minds. Because history sometimes is bigger and stranger than any made-up story.